Hello dreamers, I'm Gabriele Chiapparini, welcome to Small Photobook Cult. In this episode we will take a look at Little. It will be a long and interesting conversation, so I won't say any more. Welcome to this new episode of Small Photobook Cult. We are here with Tim Carpenter. Hello Tim, I'm really happy to speak about this book with you today.
I'm very happy to be here.
How are you?
Things are good. It's a fun time in New York City because the art book fair is here, so a lot of photography people are here.
Yeah, it's always an amazing time to meet people and discover new book. Did you discover something exciting?
I did. I always find new things there, way more than I can afford to buy.
Yeah, this is always the biggest problem.
Exactly.
You want to start from a small introduction of the book before going inside Little, right?
Yeah, that's right. I created a little presentation to just kind of show in pictures what led up to the way I envisioned and the way I photographed Little.
And it's here. We have the PDF here sharing.
Okay, right. So I created this little presentation just to show the ideas that came into Little. So this is the cover of Little, which we'll talk about. We'll go through page by page a little bit later. But it really came about when I was working on my first book with the ice plant, which was called Local Objects. And so the next screen, and then you can see next screen what the cover of the book looks like. This book was made it came out in 2017. And so I consider Little to be the third in a kind of a very rough trilogy of books made with the ice plant. This one, Local Objects, and then another book that came out in 2019 called Christmas Day, Bucks Pond Road, and then Little, which just came out last year. The trilogy is just very rough, but there are some important connections between what happened in Local Objects and what I discovered or what I wanted to do in Little. I just wanted to show some photographs of how that happened. So the first photographs I want to show are just pictures from Local Objects. There was an important time when I was making this that I had, just a bunch of maybe 200 of these pictures. And I showed them to the writer, Brad Zeller. And he said, he's like seeing these as like 100 or 1,000 lonely walks, to and from school when I was a teenager. And, it was just one of those very important sort of moments, a great sentence for me to kind of clarified what I was thinking. But, I said, well, what does that actually mean for my edit? And so there's obviously two things that it means. One is that this happens throughout the year. So there would be a time quality to it. You might see the same thing in the summer and in the winter. There would also be a movement quality because, you're moving the body through the world as you go through this. And you'll see there's upcoming in a slide or two, there's some pictures there's several pictures throughout the book that were obviously made just within moments of one another, actually, moving through the world. So I had those two ideas. Okay, so it's moving through time and also moving through space in a repetitive sort of way. The other thing, though, that I thought, is that when Brad says, it's a teenager, I was like, well, here you see the pictures of the movement through space. So what I started to think was, well, the other thing I'm interested in is if I am that teenager, how am I seeing the world? Where is my head in that? And for example, this crooked sidewalk, you see it, I think, 3 or 4 times in the book. And again, in various seasons, so that that this is somewhere you go through repeatedly over time, over the year and over the years. The other idea I started to think about was how does this person at this time make sense of the world? Through what kinds of signs and symbols is this person making sense of the world? And this was my decision when I made this. I'm going to stop here for a second because what I decided, what you're seeing now, are the pictures that I cut out because I decided that my protagonist, that teenage version of me, I wanted to get out very common, especially very common American symbols of childhood. And I wanted, because I wanted that to be kind of an interesting, it interested me at the time to get rid of this. So you see on the left there, the tire swing, the car. On the right that's for American football, for tackling. It's just a tool for practice. On the next slide, you'll see, like classic sort of playground equipment, skateboarding, a skateboarding park, very classic sort of childhood symbols and signs. Now, the reason I did not want to use them, you see here bikes and a car, is that for me, signs and symbols take you to that mental place that signs and symbols do. And so I wanted to not have that happen. I wanted you to stay in the book in that very kind of mundane daily movement through that world. Then I think I have one more slide here. You can see, there's a classic sort of very American, red, white, and blue on the right, or that is a sign on the left is a sign for high school football. So I wanted to get rid of all of those things that you might start to think about the real world or think about things you knew and stay in my book. All right. And so then the other thing that was going on in the time, I want to show you through a small book I did with TIS Books called The King of the Birds. And that's what the cover looks like. I want to show you a little bit of background of how I used to make portraits, or how I struggled to make portraits as I was going into grad school. On the next picture, on the next slide, kind of a very classic American way. Certainly Alex Soth was very, popular at the time, still is very popular. But his first book was a massive sort of influence. But also, having the roots in like Joel Sternfeld, Stephen Shore, some others, and I found it very easy to just use an aperture like f4, 5.6 or something like that, and to isolate the subject, isolate the person, and kind of have that nice, softer background. And basically, what I'm saying is what I was doing was just using a technique without really understanding how to make a good portrait. So I made portraits that are okay, but what I figured out in grad school and after that is I needed to find my own way and do something different. So the pictures that are in The King of the Birds came about because my nephew, he was at a great age because he really wanted to go on long walks with me and do whatever with his uncle. And so I figured out I need to, as much as possible, given the light, I want to stay at f8 or f11 if possible. But, I wanted the backgrounds to stay sharper and more part of the picture. And I also didn't want him always just looking at me. I wanted to really catch the body the way it is. And, like any young child's body, they're discovering their body and moving it, and that became a really interesting thing. And I've often said that I feel like for me, and using a camera is kind of gauging myself against the world. And sometimes you feel really connected to the world, and sometimes you feel really far apart from the world. And I think your photographs are very good evidence of where you are in relation to the world. What I found fascinating then working with him is that he, at the same time, is gauging his body against the world. He's gauging what his, as he gets stronger, as he gets taller, what he can climb, what he can jump on, what he can do. And anybody who's been around a child, your own child, your nieces and nephews, or any, they're always like, look what I can do, look where I can jump. And so I just loved, and I found very interesting this idea that I am trying to figure out myself in relation to the world with him, who is doing sort of the same thing, but in a very different way. And so I spent a lot of time with him. And so that also, the spending of the time with him, walking and taking pictures and having him ask a lot of questions became important. And I'll tell you a little bit about how that became important to Little.
Like it's really, really huge, the difference between this portrait and these portraits. Right. There is really something, let's say, missing in this one that you can find in this one, that it's a lot of more, I don't know, it feels like you were in a place that you are discovering, but also that in some way. I don't know if it makes sense to you.
It does make perfect sense. And, it might have hurt my feelings years ago to think that when you said something was missing in those pictures, but now you're absolutely right. And I totally agree. There was something missing, and I had to figure out what was wrong by just my technique, making it look away, but it just wasn't satisfying me, to think about this. And then when I got to this kind of picture, I was like, yeah, I'm happy with this. I think this is my kind of picture.
Yeah, there is a kind of comfort in these pictures that I cannot find here, for example.
I agree. Yeah. And, this gives, Gabrielle, it tells so much about how, yes, you need to be comfortable in your world and you need to figure that out. But also it can be a technical issue, a camera issue too. It's like you got to find the right machine or the right lens or the right aperture or the right ability to do this, so that's what I love about photography. It's figuring out sort of your body and your world, but also figuring out this machine that you choose to use and how you want to get this.
Yep.
So it's all of that together. Now, the one thing I will say, it's kind of dumb, but that was what I was using a rangefinder, a Mamiya 7 II, and that's not a great portrait camera because it's the focus. When he moves, he gets out of focus so fast, right? And I could only. The Tri-X only came in rolls of 10, so like I was reloading, all the time. But still, it was the camera I had. It was the camera I liked, and it was great. It's great for outdoor photography of people.
Yeah.
If they're not moving too fast. But like we learn to use our machines and figure out the camera and the lens and figuring out in relation to what we want to make.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's a long process, but it's also a beautiful discovery.
It's a long process, but you have to do it. I don't think there's any way around it. There's no shortcut, as far as I can tell.
No, there is not. I agree. And so we arrived to Little, right?
Yes, right. There's one little thing I wanted to show here before we go into the book itself. It's just, I found this quote from Proust long after the book was even printed, but really it'll tell you something about what I'm getting at here. He said, "The inner book of unknown signs, reading them becomes one of those acts of creation in which nobody can take our place. The only things that come from ourselves are those we draw out of the obscurity within us, which can never be known by other people." So there's two things I want to draw to that, because I want to talk about those signs and symbols that I was interested in. But I also want to talk about my objective for myself, probably the ultimate objective, and for the students I work with, is to discover the idiosyncrasy of each of us, to discover what makes us absolutely unique, absolutely different from all the rest of the billions of people on this planet. And I think this is what Proust is getting to, is that obscurity, that strangeness and that weirdness that's within us, and they can come out in pictures. And so that for me, like I sometimes tell people, like if I pick up a photo book and I feel like an absolutely unique person, that for me is the greatest thing of all. And I don't need to have any connection to what that person's history or biography or anything were, but if I see another person making sense of the world in a very idiosyncratic way, that I'm almost always buy that book or get it, that's the most important thing for me. So that's just, Proust kind of wrapped it all up there, how we are a combination of signs, but also a combination of sort of what he calls obscurity.
Okay, can be an entry point for Little for you.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And it was just, it's all, I always love coming across something, once the book was already done, but then I see these lines and I was like, oh, wow, He said it better what I wanted to say.
Yeah, it's happened quite a lot. So let's go inside Little. So Tim, what is Little about?
It's very interesting, that phrase when we say, what is something about, because that's a very common phrase that most people use. What I have tried to move away from, and not say that's a book or anything in a poem, a symphony is about something, but I'm much more interested in what brought it about. Mm-hmm. What in the maker's life was happening that this had to be created. And so I will relate that back to what I was talking about with signs, is that like signs and symbols, as I was trying to figure out, and I've been doing a lot of research because I'm writing a book about it, but I was trying to figure out what are signs and symbols in the land. And I will relate this a little bit too, as I talked about taking these walks with my nephew and spending a lot of time with them. As anyone who's spent time with a child knows, they're going to say, hey, what's that? Why is that? What's that? Why is that there? And sometimes there's a reason. But many times, and this part of the funny part of being an adult with a kid is that, like, there's no reason, or no reason that why something is there, why something has happened to that. And so, without getting too theoretical or fancy, it's like, in the theoretical terms, you have a signifier without any signified. It's something that seems to have some salience to it, some sort of reason, but it doesn't necessarily lead to anything. And so I became really interested in that, and it was a really great gift to spend so much time with my nephew and my nieces too. But my nephew just I spent a lot of time with him, and just to kind of be reopened to that time when you're asking about everything, it's like, well, why would that be placed there? Who did they mean something by that? And this has become a much bigger concern for me inside photography and out, is that I think we humans are always looking for meaning. We always want to extract meaning from things. And I've become much more convinced, and very happily convinced, that most things don't mean anything at all. And I'm very happy to be in that place and to inhabit that place. And so I wanted with this book to get at things that really, they may seem to have significance, and yet there's really just no meaning in them at all. And I think that that's really most what our lives are mostly like. So that's, it's kind of some big ideas, but, like, you still have to figure out how to make pictures to do it. I didn't want any writing in the book to talk about that. So I had to figure out how, what kind of pictures are going to speak to something like that. Why is that there? Is there significance? Is there no significance? What's the meaning of this? Or is there no meaning? And all these kind of things we ponder, that's part of why the title is Little. It's like it brought me back to that time when everything everything is up for questioning, and you don't know what the answers are.
And so, how did you choose what to photograph?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the ideas about photography in general, just because I came to understand them while I was doing this. Is that as we move through the world without a camera, with or without a camera, like most things we don't even register, most things we don't care about, but sometimes things become salient to us. They take a moment of us perceiving them, and then we say, oh, what's that? Maybe, or we don't even go so far as to say, what's that? Something, and I think this is true for photographers, something catches our eye, some sort of situation, even if there's no meaning in it, the structure of it, the form of it, something in it grabs our attention for more than just a moment, and we stick with it. And I think that's why a camera is so special, because the camera is with us in the world as we move through the world and see these things, and they become salient or not to us. So like that is my only reason for photographing. And this is true of Little, but it's not true of everything. Is that, like, it's just, I'm not looking, there's no ideas I have in my head that I'm looking to illustrate. I don't have a shoot list. I don't have, anything like that. It's just, as walking through the world, if something seems worth an extra moment's notice, then that seems to be what I want to photograph.
I want to know your relationship with beauty.
So this is a big philosophical question that we could spend an hour on, and I would love to do that. But I will do it because what I've come to understand, and this is part from the writing of Robert Adams, but from others, is that, okay, so yes, I am looking for beauty, but not probably, I don't use that word. I think that when we kind of make sense of the world, when we have a formal cohesion to the world, that's what beauty is. And that's what Robert Adams says is, like, because I think beauty is a word that tends to get associated with sunsets and, kind of, it's kind of has a trite meaning to it. But so what I describe is, I'm looking for some form that seems to make sense. And some writers call that like significant form. But as creatures, as human beings, as we move through the world, we're always looking for a better grasp on making sense of our world. And when we can get that grasp, that is kind of a formal grasp. We've made a little bit of sense of it. So that's what I'm looking for. You could say, yes, of course it's beauty, but what it is, it's just some sort of form that makes sense.
The second thing is that I suffer from when I was a child of myopia. I cannot see really well from distance. To be honest, quite bad. And I used to not use the glasses to correct him. And it happens so much time that I was laying on the sofa or on my bed in my room. And I was inside my room, watching my room without glasses. And it happens a lot that I notice things that I cannot understand what it was. And I spent time and time, I could just take the glasses on and watch it, what I was looking at. But it was so beautiful to be there, try to understand what I was looking without, I needed to force myself a lot to try to give some context and some meaning to the thing that I was watching.
Well, I would suggest that when you weren't able, you were seeing it as a thing and not as a concept. And then because we're humans, we want to make it into a concept that has meaning. And I think that is a very important thing to me. This idea of things as things before they become mental concepts or mental theories or mental whatever, categories for us, and that's a big important part of photography for me too, is that when we photograph something, those sticks in this picture we're looking at right now, they are just things. They're not even the word stick. Stick is a concept that I have in my head, and tree and bush. But the photograph, here's the thing about a camera. A camera is a dumb machine. It doesn't know all the things that are in our head, and it never will. It doesn't know anything about concepts. It doesn't know anything about categories or theories. It just sees those things as things and makes that. And I think this is like the gist of photography is to see things before they become concepts for us.
Yeah, I was just looking. I was seeing shapes, and it was so weird because I knew that shapes were something that my brain can elaborate, but at that moment, without watching properly, all was really, I don't know, different, and it was a bit like to be in a different dimension when I just can feel the shapes of the things without a meaning.
See, I love the sound of that. I love the story, and it makes great sense to me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a pity that I'm wearing, the lens inside the eyes now. So it's not happening anymore. Also because I cannot drive without. So.
No, right. It's good for safety and your safety.
Yeah, it is. And Tim, I'm starting a bit from probably one of the last part of the process, but how many pictures you shoot, and how many pictures in the end enter in the book, and how you decide which one is in and which one is not?
Yeah. So, I think it's true for everything I've done in some way or another. I bet there was at least 150 that were, this one is important to talk about, the only one with the figure in it. But I bet there were, let's say 150 that I thought were in the right space for it. And, I just kept looking at them and saying, well, I had to come down, when I finally came down to some ideas I've already expressed, is this that kind of sign that it doesn't have an object to it, and it had to pass that test to make it, make the edit. And then, one important thing that that is already sort of obvious as we've gone through the book is that there's only two different design treatments to the way the photographs are. There's only vertical pictures, which is the majority of the book, and they have a small white border around them. And then there's these bigger pictures that are through the gutter and bleed. And this is I think this is going to be the first time I've ever said this publicly. I used to be shy to say things like this, but because I don't want to spell out things, but I'm going to spell it out. The protagonist is a younger version of myself, younger than in Local Objects. The pictures, the vertical pictures with the white are his real world that he, for good and bad, he's entangled with, he's kind of stuck with, he's in. And the pictures that are immersive because they bleed and go through the gutter, those are the world that he might imagine or wish for or long for. And as you can see, some of them were made from cars. They're just bigger, more open pictures in general. Not always, but they just speak to kind of a different mental space, and that's why they're treated design-wise. They're treated differently, and so that became the really Mike Slack and Trisha Gabriel are the ice plant. Mike was the designer of this, and once we really settled on the way we were going to treat these, then it made the final edit little easier because I understood, I understood the function of how these things were going to work. And as you can see, there's just more motion, and the pictures are just bigger, and they're wide. They speak to a wider world that this protagonist might be imagining or wishing for.
Yeah, probably in the horizontal one, you can see also more elements inside, or not?
Yes.
Like there is more infos.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just even this is, obviously this is something that's become garbage or trash, but it's a sign that a marquee sign for like a restaurant or movie theater or something, something bigger beyond, your daily life. So.
And how much did you change your photography style in Little compared to the other works in the trilogy?
So I would say, boy, this is a really interesting question because I think, in one way, my style changes very, very little. I am I only, up until this point in my life, I'd only ever used that Mamiya, and I use a 4x5 view camera. So, but I'm a person who believes that our style it changes with us as our body, as we change in our lives. Because I think that different times in our lives, as we are different people, as we gain and lose things, as we grow, as we forget, we move through the world differently. We see the world differently. We inhabit it differently. And so I feel like that's my real answer is I just feel like I was inhabiting a different kind of world here than in, local objects, I said, was just a bit more distant. There's still some of that same distances in here. Obviously, this picture probably could have gone in local objects, it's probably this one too, but they would have been edited out because of the symbols that are in them. So it's really, part of it, it's really interesting to look back on things and say, well, oh gosh, I was making pictures in a different way. I was moving my body. I had a different machine. That certainly could change things. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of giving a non-answer to this, just in saying that I was inhabiting the world in a different way, and that, that's so important to me because the camera's the only medium that necessarily attends our body. It has to move along with our body, even when we're talking about a tripod. And so, if your body is moving differently than it did 5 years ago, which it is, if it's moving differently than it was an hour ago because your mood is different, which it is. Camera picks up on that. The camera, it is with you. I say, if you're in a good mood and you're standing tall and your shoulders are open, you're going to make different pictures than if you you just broke up with somebody or your pet died. You're going to be a closed body. Your shoulders are going to be, and you're going to be in a negative space, and the camera's going to go along with that negative space that you're in. And that's the way that this machine works. So that's a long answer to kind of give you not a great answer, but
no. But I understand. Do you think so? It's a kind of unconscious movement. You respond of your stage in life in that moment.
I don't think there's any way not to. I think we are bodily creatures, and our moods and the way, this is, again, I don't want to get too much on theory, but the one important thing from Heidegger for me is he said, we are not our ideas and our theories and our concepts. We are a bundle of habits, and a bundle of moods, and a bundle of ways of, that way that we move through the world and that we actually interact with the world. And I believe that. Mm-hmm. I really believe that that's the more important part of us than the things that we know as concepts. And so, that's why I'm fascinated with the camera, and the connection to that is that the camera is very responsive to those moods and those habits and to that body and the way it moves. So anyway, let's talk. So I wanted to talk about this picture because I made a few of them. And, this was just this wonderful moment where my nephew picked up a couple of very large, oak leaves. And because he was still in that space, being young, those leaves became wings. And he was, flapping them. And I was just so lucky to have the film loaded then, and because it wasn't something I could have recreated, and I was at a good distance from him. And he made I made a couple 3 exposures of this, and I ended up just using one of them. But I needed I'm gonna say that all of the other pictures are what I would call first person pictures. They are inhabited by, and they force the view on the first person viewer, which is me. But this is a third person picture. This is me. This is sort of me, the maker, showing giving you example of what the imagination can do. It can turn a leaf into a wing. And that is kind of, again, this is something I probably haven't said before out loud, but I mean this picture to be a key to the whole rest of the book. That this is the space that we all inhabit. Is that even when we're adults, we may not pick up leaves to be wings, but we certainly use our imagination, our vision to make sense of the world. He's making sense of the world in a different way, but this is how I wanted to express that.
So this picture is the text and the context of your book.
It could be. I just really, I don't like the word context, but I see what you mean, and yes, it's it's just the key. It's the Yeah, I don't know. There must be another good word for it, but like I think you need to. If it would be a very different book, and I don't think it would be the book I wanted if it just didn't have this single picture.
Are you like completely against the text in the photo books?
A lot of my friends, we joke about this. I would say the easiest answer is mostly yes, but I'll explain a little bit to that. I trust photographs, and I think that photographs do something unique. And they do things that are outside of languages and sign systems. And I like that. I trust it. Now, when I'm working with someone, my longer term students, they wrestle with text and thinking about it. And my answer is always, listen, if you feel like the object at the end, if the text is there, if you remove the text and it fails, then that's fine. But if you can remove the text and the book is still does what it needs to do, and we remove the text. So, and another kind of rule for me is that I would almost never allow or never approve of a text that is expository in that it explains the book. The text would have to be sort of oblique and not, it would have to do something else that would enhance the book. So I kind of have this rule, and this is for myself, but for everyone I work with, it's the rule of leasts. So it's got to be the smallest book, trim size wise. It's got to be the fewest pictures, the fewest pages, the least text, the least everything. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be a tiny book with nothing in it.
No.
You could still have a 1,000-page book that's really big. I just mean that we have to get down to the very smallest amount of what that is to get it through. That could still be a big book.
No, yeah, I agree 100%. And I love, a lot of years ago, I read this review of a record that I really like, that is YS of Joanna Newsom and Steve Albini.
Oh, yes, right. Uh-huh.
I love that record. 5 songs, 20 minutes each.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think Steve Albini was the technician recording the album.
I think you're right.
And they start with a huge orchestra with the arpa and the voice of Joanna just inside the sound. And then here Steve start to remove everything he can. Not remove, but, lower.
Yeah.
And in the end, they found this album came out, and it's amazing. You can see everything. You can listen, hear everything, all the orchestra playing. But the way they decide to to mix everything, it works really good, because in the end they notice that the record can work just with the voice and the arpa, but the orchestra really add another layer. But they decide to put the orchestra quite low.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's quite similar to a project, to a photo book. Like, as you said, you can add text, but if the text just explains something that the picture can do, so why to do it?
Yeah, and I think, again, since I work with so many students and reviews and stuff, I think there's almost this baseline thought that all photo books need some sort of essay. And this is an idea I'm working on for this next book I'm writing. This is what bugs me. I think that most of the world, and even people in our world, they always think that photography or photographs are in need of some sort of repair. And it's been called an incomplete utterance. And for me, I was like, no, a photograph is a complete utterance. My photographs, and the ones I love and the ones my friends make, are not in need of fixing. They're not in need of repair. And they're certainly not in need of repair by language. And that's a very strong feeling I have. And so I just want to impress people upon that. If you can say what you want, and if you can get what you want across in your photographs, trust yourself, trust the medium, trust the book to do that. But again, younger people, first book, you're like, oh, I got to have an essay in here. I got to have this, I got to have that. And I was like, no, you don't necessarily,
But also because to have an essay is quite comfortable, especially if if the essay is wrote from someone with a kind of authority.
That, unfortunately, some publishers, they, especially if it's a brand new artist, if you have a writer with authority, then that helps because that name is on the book.
Yeah.
That's, there's parts of the world that, that are real world publishing, marketing, that makes sense. So,
yeah, but I think can be also more comfortable for the young photographer releasing the first work, because they said, okay, I have this voice speaking about my work, saying that my work works.
And my work works. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And but you have a text in your book.
Yeah. So you could call it a text. I call it a visual. I almost call it a visual. I call it just another picture, and being a little silly there. But I will tell you. So when Mike and I Slack were one of the first times he looked through this, he's like, "So we're going to give up a whole 2-page spread just for that little thing." So, and I said, "Yeah." I said, "This is important," and you can see the way that the way that it's located, that it's in parentheses. These are important things for me to kind of try. Okay, so I'm going to back up a second. Is that the objective, and I'm not the person who made this up. Many people said it, the objective of poetry is to use words not as symbols or as signs, but as things. That's what most poets want to try to do. I want these words to exist and to mean, and they refer to a specific person, but because of their treatment and placement, they are also kind of a thing that sits there in the rest of the book. Does that make sense?
Yeah. His first record was Little, or
That's
not?
right.
Is the title connected to that record or not at all?
It is connected to that record, yes. But it was an important thing, and I talked about this. The title is just Little. This is not, Song for Vic Chessnutt is not a subtitle. It is not part of the title. It is just, like I said, it's just an element in there. But it's an important element for me. But yeah, so like this, and this brings us to something, is that Vic Chessnutt is one, probably maybe my single favorite songwriter of many musicians. But like a lot of his characters, especially in Little and some other, he writes a lot about young characters whose lives are at a point where things may go okay, but things may not go so well for that person. And that just fed into, where I'm walking with my nephew. And when you're at a point in your life where you're figuring out things, and there are these different points in your life where, like I said, things might turn out really great and things might not. And you're just at this space where you don't know. And again, this don't know, this not knowing is, as I've already talked about it, this thing's not having meaning are really important to me. And so that all kind of just fit together with his, the way he titled the record and the way he wrote songs.
Yeah. And it's a song for Vic Chessnutt. What song?
So my book itself is my book is the song for Vic. That this is a song for this person.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song. It's a beautiful way to put it.
Thanks. I thought about it a long time. This was a big, even for just being a tiny little thing, it's something I thought about a long time.
But I'm coming from music. I started to be a photographer because I failed as a musician. But I always find a huge connection between music and photography all the time.
Absolutely.
Like it's happened constantly in a lot of books. This is also why in each episode I ask to the guests if they have a specific music suggested to watch the book, because also to me it's quite common to go outside taking pictures having in mind a specific kind of music or a specific song. So this is why.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I there's almost always a song in my head somehow. I'm making pictures. Yeah.
How did you reconnect with your inner child to work on this project?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this a little bit. It's like when I was walking around with my nephew and he's always asking, "What's that? What's that?" It kind of opened me to it. I think, as we get older, we kind of just close off lots of parts of ourselves, and like there's even scientific evidence that we sort of learn a lot, we take in a lot, but then as like teenagers and later, we actually are kind of reducing ourselves, like, reducing the complexity of ourselves. And so like that, I was just like opened up to a different complexity. And, like, here's probably the most interesting thing about it is I was reading theory, French theory and German theory about signs and stuff, but I have an actual human being who's trying to make sense of signs, and that grounded it. That made me say, okay, good, we're on this picture. I was astounded. This just happens to be some land that my sister lives on that my family owns. And I was walking around and somebody had tied this bit of rag around a tree. And I was like, who and why. I had no idea, but of course I photographed it. And I even asked myself, I was like, why is there, she's like, what? Like we were just all like, how did this happen? And that's the space I want to exist in, is like that there is no real meaning. We look for signs because that's the kind of creature we are. We look for symbols, we look for meaning. And most of the time it's just not there, and we can try for this idea and everything. But this picture is also very good. And this picture, once I made it, I knew it had to be in the book because it just got to what I was thinking about.
It's an exercise that probably it's not so easy.
It is. Oh, yeah. And I'm sure that, Ron Jude has talked about this too. When he goes, even when he looked at his younger pictures, he's like, there's no way I can become that person again to make those pictures. Mm-hmm. And, he kind of wishes. And I was like, I agree. And I'm talking about, my nephew was not even making pictures. He's just really experiencing the world. So maybe that, that's what I was trying to get at, is he is just a perception machine, right? As any kid is. They're taking all this in and trying to make some sense of it. And so maybe part of me has closed part of that down as an adult. And so that's where I wanted to have it again, was to just be able to look at almost anything and kind of curious or wonder, what that portends of, what that might point to, even when it's not portending or pointing to anything.
Yeah. Do you start this project with a specific idea of the protagonist in mind, or does that aspect reveal itself as you were shooting?
Yeah. So, okay. So there's two parts to that question. The one important, I'm going to take the latter part of that question. Everything does reveal itself to me. I'm a guy who makes a lot of pictures, and then I look at them and try to be, I call it trying to be objective about like the subjectivities that I've made, and I try to figure, it's like, well, what kind of picture am I making? What distances I am? What are the edges of my picture looking like? What is the subject matter I'm choosing? I'm trying to look at all of that, think about it, say what's coming out of that. So it reveals itself to me. But I will tell you, the first part of your question is about like what is the age of the protagonist? Because I think of everything that I've done as being just different aspects of me at different times. The book I didn't show in the little introduction, the middle book, Christmas Day, Bucks Pond Road, I actually thought of myself as being quite an older person at a different time in life. And this book, though, became more, it was little, I did start to think of myself as that 6 or 7 year old, where, you can be on your own and, some things, language, obviously, some concepts, but still almost everything's still brand new. And you're kind of trying to figure out, trying to place things in concepts and trying to shape this world in a really active way. And that's where I wanted to inhabit. So like I did consider myself in a certain age group. So, but still letting the work itself reveal that to me, and it's very much a cyclical thing. You're kind of in it while you're doing it and trying to figure it out while you're doing it.
Was you able to apply the same aspect during the editing part?
Yeah. Well, again, I use that phrase, being objective about your subjectivity. Like, I think that's for me is editing, it's like, can I distance myself from my picture making self a little bit, my book making self from my picture making, and say, well, what's in here? What's the basic part of this? What's the gist of it? And then, like I said before, it was also important for me to, once I figure out the two different picture types, design types, then I was like, okay, this kind of picture, this vertical with the white border, the world, or for example, the one you're on right now.
This one.
So, yeah. So I also started to edit, and then once those basic ideas start to get around, and I'm going to tell you a more subtle point about Vic Chessnutt's writing, is that when I said, people could end up bad in life, like there's danger, there's evil, there's badness in Vic Chessnutt's world. And I thought, I kind of liked this picture because some people said it was a little creepy. And I like that. It's just where a swing set probably, there was probably a swing there and it's no longer there. But these pictures of these two chains kind of hanging right there is foreboding. And, it's dark and there's the tree. And I wanted, so then some smaller ideas, so I have I have the bigger ideas, but some smaller ideas of what you might call menace or foreboding. It's like, okay, I can start to think about some of that, being some of the underlying things in the pictures.
So, because we're speaking about the edit, there is a specific reason why you decide, for example, to open the book with this one.
Yeah, and so to get very specific, and I'm really glad we're talking this way because I think a lot of I even myself am shy about telling too much. But, but when we're in conversation like this, or when I'm talking with students, like I do think we need to open ourselves up and tell some things. And like, so this picture it was the most representative, and this is children running through, through a space, both out towards the bigger world and towards, towards the small, maybe the smaller world, or but like, and the repetition that it requires, like you got to run there a lot, right? To wear down the grass and to get it to dirt. And obviously that's showing that there's this little gap that you choose, and that's the way to this bigger world. And so like, that all of those resonances like that I can explain to myself again, like I don't like explaining what I just said to you. I generally don't like doing. I don't like saying those things in English because we all can get them, but still one has to say these things to yourself and say, this picture does this thing. It sets up physical bodily movement through a world, even though there's no kids there. But that was worn down over months and years of kids running through there. And so that's the kind of thing like that seemed to me a good way to kind of set this up.
Yeah. I'm going to ask the same for the last. We close with this.
Well, yeah. So you may note the last one is actually kind of a flip version of the second picture. So that is also a little bit of a bookend. There's a picture. You can go back. Let's see, the one just after. Yeah. So this is a bit of a strange place because like it's just a pedestrian crossing for a railroad, and it's a bit of an unusual place. And you can also see that the sidewalk just kind of juts out, and there's a phrase. And probably there's an equivalent Italian phrase, but there's a phrase about the wrong side of the tracks. Which means you're from the bad part of town. And that also resonated with a lot of what Vic Chessnutt would have written about as people who maybe because of economics or social situation or education, you could say they were the wrong side of the tracks. So that, again, that's one thing I would not often articulate. People get it. And so what you can see here is that this picture is from one side of the tracks. And then the very ending picture is, if you flip to it, yeah, so it just happened to be made from the other side. And I did, when I did these, it's just because I walk this place all the time. I probably have dozens more taken in this very short area, but I realized that these two things could do what I wanted, and I could kind of bracket the book that way by letting you enter one way and kind of exit in another way.
Yeah, I'm glad you're sharing all these thoughts with us.
Like I said, I do think it's important when you're like in learning environments or like conversational environments. Like these are things, if I pick up the book in a bookstore or at a book fair, I would never, ever, ever want to know them. But like, I think it's really good things to talk about, in learning environments or in sharing environments, like to talk about how you think of these things.
I think it's always super curious to see a specific point of view and a specific choice.
Agree.
Why the black and white?
One is the first answer is very practical. I shot color slide film going into graduate school. But the guy who ran the program, Robert Lyons, he was very insistent. Whatever I did, I had to control the entire process. And so I didn't know how to develop or print color film, whether on negative or positive. I did already know from my past how to develop and print black and white. So that is the basic answer is that, well, okay, I can take over the entire process by black and white. Mm-hmm. So I became a black and white photographer in graduate school. So that was 2010. But that's also when I switched to that Mamiya 7.2 that I mentioned, that rangefinder. And then maybe a year later is when I got the 4x5. And it, as another practical matter, like, Tri-X is a very forgiving film to use. And, like for some strange reason, I'm sure somebody out there listening would know this, but like the sheets of Tri-X are rated at a different ISO than in the rolls. But what I found is my meter, I set like 250. I probably underexposed. Anyway, I set the meter for one, and then I could use it for both the sheets and the rolls. And that worked out fine. Like I just simplified everything. And so the black and white had a practical simplicity to it. And, I think I just was at a point where that kind of change made sense. And so there's, in one way, there's no better reason than that. But I just started to inhabit the world pretty well. I felt like I was inhabiting it pretty well in black and white. and it also matched up with maybe where my head was and my heart was, at the time, and still is somewhat. I will say, had about a year and a half of owning my first digital camera, and so I do work much more in color now. But I still shoot. If I shoot film, it's still Tri-X.
And did you choose a specific camera for this project or not?
It was only, no, I mean, I didn't, I was just using that Mamiya with an 80 millimeter lens, which is the normal lens on that. So this is all just the Mamiya, but it was really the only camera I owned. So that was all the pictures I was making with it.
How much do you think is important to study photography theory to create meaningful works?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think my one answer is not at all. I mean, I think there's some amazing people who make amazing things that have never picked up, what we consider the canon of theory. I do think if one becomes interested in making serious pictures and, you're devoting time and thinking about it, it doesn't hurt to start to become, get in conversation with what has been written and thought about. Now, there's a lot of different ways to go through that. Like when I was first getting into it, you'd pick up one of these theory books and it would almost entirely center on exposing you to theorists who were not photographers. So Barth, Sontag, Walter Benjamin, some stuff back there. If I tend to make recommendations, I try to steer people first more towards the writing that was done by photographers. So like Moira Davey, Stephen Shore, Robert Adams, Wright Morris. There's more that I'm just not thinking of off the top of my head. But I think that's to me is a better place to start. Because what I think is kind of strange is that sometimes people who want to use a camera start to read theory that's about the photograph as like a document or a text, rather than reading theory about what it is to use a camera. And so that's why I would point more towards the people who use cameras and to make sense of their world, that would start there first.
And how did you decide when a group of images is ready to be a book?
This is this is a question that gets asked all the time. And, yeah, right. I mean, in any teaching setting, and for me, I found out, so the first answer is I have to exhausted some sort of pictorial idea. I have to have gotten it out of my system. And I think what that even means is you become bored with making a certain kind of picture. Like you get to the point where it's not exciting to you anymore. You don't want to, maybe you're like, I want to change the lens, or I want to do something different. And that's, I've been around doing this long enough that I can recognize those points in my life where I'm like, all right, I've gotten through this idea. So now it's not a burning desire in me to make the photographs anymore. So maybe now it's time to make sense of it in the book form. So that's really my main answer. And whenever I work with student and I'm probing, I'm asking them, well, is this done? And they're like, I don't know. I feel like there's some things. And I was like, well, then you got to go get to that point where you're pretty damn sure that you've gotten through that. And once you have, then cool. It's different for everybody. And I bet this has happened to you. Sometimes you exhaust an idea in just a few months, or whatever, it could be. It doesn't have to mean that every idea is like this grand concept that's going to take you years to figure out. There may be several that take you years to figure out, but there are going to be some that, maybe a transitional point in your life where you made pictures in a few months and then your life changed. You got married, you got divorced, you had a kid, you whatever, all this kind of stuff. And now your life is different. And now that part of your life is over. And that idea is done. And so now you can go back on it.
How much you make sense of the work during the process of shooting and how much in the end?
Yeah, I would say that has changed for me over time. I think it seems to me natural that it might change for other people over time. Is that when I was younger and I was, didn't know as much as what I was doing, it was a much later after I'd made a lot of pictures and I was going through it. That's when I was trying to figure it out. I have, let's say maybe I've accelerated that. I'm trying to earlier in what I'm doing to try to figure it out. And some of that also may have to do with working in digital, because film was just a longer process of whether I was developing it or getting it developed and then, making some work scans, making some work prints. And now I have this immediate ability to work through things. So think that it's a thing that has changed for me over time. Is it probably still don't do it really fast, but I do it faster, kind of getting sense of like, oh, here's a pictorial idea and I like it. So I'm gonna maybe even write a few little sentences to myself about it. I'm gonna articulate this and I'm gonna work on it. Whereas that would have been a much later thing in the process for me before.
And Tim, speaking about the object itself, you decide to produce quite a small book. I was working on that, like on the physical object. What were your decisions?
Yeah. Well, owing to the title and owing to, I would tell you one thing about, little is right about the size of local objects, maybe a little bit smaller. My teacher, Mary Fry, a brilliant photographer, grad school teacher, when she spoke to me about local objects, she said it feels like a hymnal, like a book from church. And I think the object is so important. And I like books where if I can lie in bed, I can have it on my chest, and I don't need a table, to lay it out on. I like books. I mean, I love books where I have to lay it on a table, but I guess for me, so like this, this trim size was really important. It's little, and also the character is diminutive. And these pictures, the pictures that I make they can be read without being gigantic, like they work. So that was all going into it. So I made a maquette, on my home printer, I bound it to show to the ice plant. And that was roughly the same size that we decided to make it. Mike and Trisha did something interesting. Unfortunately, you can't quite see it in the in any PDF or anything. But what they did is there's hard book boards, normal book boards that are the cover, but they're cut at the top and the bottom, and kind of left raw, and it kind of evokes also. And I'm not sure if the same thing would be true in Europe or in Italy, but it evokes a book that one might get in school as when you're young.
Yeah.
And so there was that kind of resonance to it. So, and that's why you work with really smart publishers and people who really know a lot about books, is because they make some, there's even those design choices in the way you make your cover and the way you construct the book that all comes together in how you feel about this thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's always quite important to work with people that know what they're doing, and also,
oh my gosh,
to have someone outside the project watching at the project from outside.
That's right. I mean, I somehow very lucky landed with Mike and Trisha because I feel like I can get stuff maybe to 90-95%, and they seem to see the things in it that I just haven't quite seen. Mm-hmm. And they bring it that extra little bit. So I'm really lucky.
Tim, do you want to add something?
I don't think so. I think we got to talk about a lot of the important ideas in this. And, I'll even say I'm a guy who, as I've already said, like, I don't want to dominate things with ideas, mm-hmm. I think it's good, and it's nice to talk about like the way that we do think through things and conceptualize things, and why we would choose this picture and not another picture, why we would choose to bookend, like why we want to have through the gutter, why do we, because here's one thing I'll say at the end. I say this to my students, I say it to myself: everything is communicative in a book, even if the reader, the viewer, doesn't articulate all of this. The trim size of the book, the way the pictures are printed, the borders, the white spaces, the left and right, the doubles, through the gutter. Every little bit of this is going to be read and understood by any viewer as having some sort of import, and again, whether it becomes super important meaning or not, it's communicative. It's doing something. And so like every bit of this is something we need to think through and consider. Yeah,
100%. It's really interesting part of the episode of Marie-Laine Martineau when she explained some choice of the object, the book. And she said, I want the book to be quite big, but not too big, because I want to be the people to be quite close to the images, quite close to the object. And I think when you start to, design a book, to have all these things in mind, also what you want, that is going to be the relationship between the viewer and the object. It's really important. And also the action that you require, like if you have really big pages, you will need a table, like you said. So probably you're going to sit down And also all these actions are really meaningful, I think, in the end.
Entirely, absolutely, 100%. Yes.
And I love it. They have to fit with the project in the end.
That's right. I mean, everything has to come together in that whole, and I have to say this, like, if you make one ad move, it can really undermine the whole thing,
Yeah.
So you have to be really careful.
Yeah, really. Tim, do you have a pictures that you love specifically?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, like the one we're on, I would say, and I mean the one of my nephew is important, not only in the structure of the book, but like, because also I like the kid. He's a good kid. He's fun. He's in college now. He's studying astrophysics, which is just crazy. But like,
yeah.
But again, like it was just, I just felt like even in the moment, I was like, this incredible gift that like, that he picked up the lead, but that also he moved his body like this, because again, like as we get older, even if you go dancing and whatever, like we become self-conscious about our bodies, right? Like and just to have this quick moment of this existing in some other, in his head, but in the world, this, like I said, this is the most important photograph to understanding the rest of the stuff. But also I just felt like this kid gave me this gift, not knowing to or intending to or anything like that. And I just happened to be there with the camera. And then so like, that's just, that's about all I want out of life. I got to tell you. So.
Yeah, I understand. Do you have a specific music to suggest to listen while watching this book?
Yeah, so I would say, the record called Little by Vic Chessnutt, but it's specifically, there's a song called Danny Carlisle, which is just the name of a kid. And he's a very exemplary of that kid I was talking about who may or may not do well in life. And the song is about that. And I'll use a bad word on the podcast, but it's because it's in the line. But Vic Chessnutt describes this child as being at a place where he would rather dream than fuck. So he's not at his adult place where he's wanting boys or girls or whatever he's going to want. He's still in that place where he's going to dream, and that is that edge where I wanted this whole book to be.
And do you learn something during the process of making this project that can help other photographer to do a better job?
Oh my gosh, I think I learned something in every project. But again, like some of the things we've talked about is to use collaborators, use your publisher to get these things and to understand, like it's just always understanding that, being really free and easy and intuitive in making your photographs, but figuring out that way to kind of remove yourself from the photographer you are to become the bookmaker. Because they're just different brain patterns to me. I think they're just different ways of inhabiting the world, and like, and being really tough on yourself. And I learned this with each book, but especially with this one, because I know it's going to sound dumb that I keep overstating this, but like when we finally figured out the small white borders versus this, like it was really important because I wanted these pictures to be big, but I wanted them to be bordered because they needed to do something. And so I'm going off a little bit far, but but being really tough and really objective on all of your choices that you've made, very free and easy choices in making the photographs, but now being in a different headset and a different mindset, and being super tough on every little choice to make sure it gets out what you want. And maybe I'll say one thing, because I use this phrase from the poet Paul Valéry. He would I believe he was talking to students at the time, or people who were learning to write poetry, and they didn't like the idea of being systematic or looking at things objectively, because they thought, oh, poetry is all just inspiration. And he said to them, being systematic or being objective and being tough on it, that's the way you honor the muse that you have in you. And that idea just like opened up so much for me. Is like, yes, use the muse, make your pictures. The way that you really honor that inspiration, that intuition, is by being really tough on it after that. And that is the thing I always try to take away from what I learned when making each book, is being really tough on the inspiration and thus getting the most out of the inspiration.
Amazing. It's really amazing. It's really interesting.
I found it amazing too.
It is. And the very last question, can you suggest us a book to have in the podcast in the future?
Oh my gosh, so many. Well, do you know, I'm going to give you two. One, because it's so brand new and it's by one of my best friends. It's a guy named Carl Woolley. They just came out at the book fair, and it's called Collider. Collider. It is so new. The other book that is
wait,
really...
who is the publisher?
That is TIS Books.
Okay.
His name is Carl Woolley, Carl, and his last name is Wooley. And then the other book that, listen, I could give you 100 books, but the one that I'm so excited about right now is a book by Lartieri, and it is called Grace, and it is by Scott Offen. His last name is Offen. This book is a little piece of magic. It creates a world that is strange and unusual and beautiful, and he just pulls off something like a miracle. It's such a great book.
Thanks. So
my pleasure.
Thanks so much, Tim. It was really beautiful to have you here.
It was a delight. I'm really glad that we got the time to do this.
Yeah, me too. It's not always easy, but I'm really glad too that we found the right time. And
yes,
let's do it again with another book.
I'd love to. you know I can talk. You can tell I can talk.
Yeah, but this is good. It's make my work easier. Like you also remove a lot of questions when you were speaking because, yeah, you reply without asking. So really good.
Yeah. Great.
Okay. Thanks so much. Thanks so much to everybody, and see you the next time. And bye-bye, Tim. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you.